Auditors collect their audit evidence and document it in what is called the working papers. So auditors have some discretion as to what they include in the working papers. They use their professional judgment to determine what to document. But remember that we want to protect ourselves from legal liability. We want to be able to prove that we adequately followed the professional standards when conducting the audit. So we want to make sure that we collect enough documented evidence that we actually did our job thoroughly. So even though we have some discretion in what we include in these working papers, we need to keep in mind, what would a third party, let's say an outside auditor, was coming in reading over our working papers, do they have enough information from those working papers to understand the procedures we performed and understand the rationale for the opinion we made? If not, our working papers are lacking, and that might cause problems down the road if we do face issues with lawsuits and whatnot. So audits are going to have different information that's documented based on the nature of the audit. So no two working papers for different audits are going to be exactly the same, but there is some standard information that's typically included in these working papers. So we need to distinguish between what's called a permanent file and a current file. Basically, a permanent file is a file that kind of rolls over from year to year, that accumulates over time. So if we have an existing audit client that we worked with for years, we're going to add to this permanent file every year. So there's some typical information that would be included in the permanent file, info about the client contact and personnel information, stuff like, the address of the head office, organizational hierarchy charts showing responsibilities of key members within the organization, the details and contact information for banks and lawyers. Remember that oftentimes we're going to contact the bank to get confirmation about account balances and loan balances. Also, we want to include information regarding contracts and long-term agreements, so different documentation involving those agreements will be included in this permanent file. Information about the board of directors, not only who serves on the board, but what subcommittees they serve on. In particular, the auditors are very interested in who's serving on the audit committee, because we have such an important relationship with those individuals when we're conducting the audit. And recall, during the risk assessment stage of the audit, one of the ways we gathered evidence to gain an understanding of the entity is to read over the minutes of board of directors meetings. So these past board of director meeting minutes will be included in the permanent file, and also any information about management bonuses or stock options, stuff like that, would be included as well. There's also a big focus on documentation around internal control that's included in the permanent file. So for instance, prior year's financial statements and audit reports are included in the permanent file, as well as any analytical procedures used by auditors to observe trends. And then we have flow charts that show different aspects of internal control. Stuff like that's going to be included in the permanent file, carried over from year to year. And also any communications between management and the auditors from prior audits. Those key communications are going to be included in the permanent file. Now, on the other side, we have the current file, and basically this is really focused on the documentation for the current year. So everything done during risk assessment and the risk response phase must be thoroughly documented, again, to safeguard ourselves against legal liability. So we want to be as thorough as possible, but also we want to try to keep things concise. So, you think about skills needed by accounting students, and we really kind of focus on technical skills. And of course, that's really important to understanding the technical aspects of accounting and audit, but also communication skills are really key, especially written communication skills, because we could do a great audit, but if we don't document it properly, we could still find ourselves in trouble at the end of the day. So it's important that we have accurate documentation, and we have members on our audit team that are able to clearly and concisely communicate what's going on with these audit procedures. Now we can see here we have the 3 different phases of the audit. And notice there's going to be different pieces of information included in the current file based on what phase of the audit we find ourselves in. So we can see here first the risk assessment phase. This is the phase we are most familiar with up until this point in our course. We've talked about most of these items in the past, so things like the engagement letter need to be included in the current file. Remember, during this risk assessment phase, one of our big responsibilities is trying to gain an understanding of the client. So any evidence that we obtained under the auspices of trying to understand the client, that's going to be included. Remember, analytical procedures are needed to aid in risk identification during the risk assessment phase. So we need to talk about any analytical procedures such as trend or ratio analysis that we used. And then, we really want to have a focus on the evidence that we gathered regarding risks, particularly risks to the company for potential fraud. That's really critical to have that very, very carefully documented. Our assessment of materiality, remember we talked about that in the past. We have to have a threshold for materiality, so we want to discuss how we came up with that threshold. What did we do? What techniques do we use to figure out what actually would be a material misstatement in the financials? We also want to talk about our audit strategy and the specific audit program that we use to carry out the audit. So this audit program is developed in the risk assessment phase. Then we actually move forward and carry out the audit program in the risk response phase. So during the risk response phase, we're doing the tests of controls. We're undertaking those substantive tests. So all these different tests we do, we need to have documentation of the steps that we took to perform those tests. Any communications that we have with management, for instance, management prepares a representation letter. We need to include that in our working papers in the current file. And then we could see during the reporting phase, the copy of the final audit report. This is also a key piece of information that we need to include in our current file for the particular year. Now, we're going to look a little bit at the detail of what we call lead schedules. Basically, a lead schedule is prepared for every category of account that we're scrutinizing during our audit. So notice here we have a lead schedule for the cash account. So typically you'll have the trial balance for the company and you'll have lead schedules that help tie back individual balances to that trial balance. So in this case, we're looking at cash. Notice we show good documentation here, the initials of the person preparing the lead schedule, the reviewers of the lead schedule, and the dates on which they conducted that work. And what we're doing in this particular lead schedule is looking at our cash balances and just verifying that the cash balances showing up on the balance sheet are indeed correct. So we can see here that we had our prior year balance, right, from the prior year. Basically, this little PY is a checkoff that we put on the lead schedule that just verifies that, yes, the prior year balance was in fact correct. We could see here the current year balance at the end of the year, or in the last day of the financials. We want to make sure that that's accurate. So when we actually find the verification that, yes, the cash in Wells Fargo, they actually do in fact have $11,000. All right, we're going to have this little TB that just signs off that the trial balance amount is indeed correct. So you can see we go through this process for each of the different forms of cash that are included in the cash numbers on the balance sheet. And we're going to talk about these lead schedules in a lot more detail going down the line, but I just want you to be aware for today's purposes, just in a general way, what these schedules look like. We could see here another schedule. In this case, we are looking at the receivables here. So we're basically looking at outstanding receivables, kind of tying back to see if those balances are indeed correct. So remember, with receivables, one way to confirm this is to actually contact our client's customers, basically to see, do they in fact believe they owe what the client says they owe, right? Is the accounts receivable balance on our client's balance sheet accurately reported. So this lead schedule is basically showing the investigation we did to verify those amounts. So we're going to talk about this again in a lot more detail going forward, but just want you to understand that our working papers take into account a lot of different information. We want to distinguish again between our permanent file that has kind of stuff that rolls over from year to year and the information that's included in our current file. So these working papers for particular account balances and the techniques we use to verify those balances, those will be included in our current file working papers.